In just 47 seconds, everything changed. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his fist. He simply opened a manila folder and read 3 words that would haunt FBI Director Kash Patel for the rest of his career. The enemies list. Cameras zoomed in, the chamber fell silent. What happened next exposed the darkest secret, buried deep within America's most powerful law enforcement agency. At exactly 2:17 p.m. on March 15, 2025, Senator Whitehouse adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and stared across the mahogany committee table at FBI Director Kash Patel. The Hart Senate office building buzzed with an unusual tension. Reporters packed every available seat. C-SPAN cameras rolled. Twitter was already exploding with speculation about what the Rhode Island Democrat had planned for this oversight hearing. But nobody was prepared for what came next. Patel sat like a man carved from granite. His hands folded, FBI badge glinting under the harsh committee room lights. He had weathered storms before. Congressional hearings were political theater, he told himself. Survive the questions. Stick to the talking points. Protect the agency. His dark suit was pressed to perfection. His demeanor calm and professional. But something was different about Whitehouse today. The senator's usual methodical approach had an edge, a sharpness that made even seasoned FBI veterans in the gallery shift uncomfortably in their seats. Director Patel, Whitehouse began, his voice carrying that distinctive New England precision that had intimidated witnesses for over a decade. I want to talk to you about personnel decisions at the FBI since your confirmation. Specifically, I want to discuss what some of your former colleagues are calling an enemies list. The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Patel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His media training kicked in immediately. Deny, deflect, redirect.
Senator, there is no enemies list,
Patel responded, his voice steady but with the slightest tremor that trained ears could detect. The FBI operates based on merit, professionalism, and the rule of law. Any personnel actions taken have been based solely on performance and the needs of the Bureau. Whitehouse smiled. Not a warm smile, not a political smile, the smile of a prosecutor who knows his witness just walked into a trap. Director, I appreciate that response, Whitehouse said, reaching into his briefcase. But I have here a document that I think you'll find interesting. He pulled out a thick folder, its contents clearly organized with colored tabs and sticky notes. The preparation was obvious. This wasn't a fishing expedition. This was a surgical strike. The folder hit the table with a sound that seemed to echo through the chamber. Patel's eyes fixed on it immediately, his previous confidence wavering. Around the room, staffers leaned forward. Journalists raised their phones to record. Even the usually stoic Capitol police officers flanking the doors seemed to sense something significant was about to unfold. This document, Whitehouse continued, was provided to my office by current and former FBI employees who are deeply concerned about the direction of the Bureau under your leadership. It contains what appears to be a list of approximately 60 individuals who have been flagged for adverse actions since you took office 7 months ago. 7 months. The timeline mattered. Patel had been confirmed in February 2025, amid significant controversy. Senate Democrats had raised concerns about his loyalty to Donald Trump, his previous statements about the deep state, and his promises to clean house at the FBI. Republicans had praised his commitment to rooting out bias and restoring integrity to law enforcement. But nobody had talked about lists. Patel straightened in his chair, his lawyer instincts taking over. Senator, I have no knowledge of any such document. If former employees are making allegations, I would encourage them to follow proper whistleblower procedures rather than engage in political theater. Political theater? Whitehouse's eyebrows rose. Director, let me read you some names from this alleged list and their current status, and you tell me if this sounds like theater. The senator opened the folder to the first page. His finger traced down a column of names, some highlighted in yellow, others marked with red ink. The methodology was clear, systematic, damning. Agent Sarah Chen, 15-year veteran of counterterrorism, listed here as politically unreliable, transferred to a dead-end position in the Anchorage field office last month. Agent Marcus Williams, former member of the January 6th investigation team, listed as compromised loyalty, currently under internal investigation for alleged misconduct that, curiously, wasn't alleged until after your arrival. Each name was a hammer blow. Patel's hands remained steady on the table, but observers noticed his knuckles were beginning to show white. His breathing had quickened almost imperceptibly. The carefully maintained facade of control was developing cracks. "Senator," Patel interrupted, "if you have specific allegations about personnel actions, I'm happy to review them through proper channels. But I cannot and will not discuss ongoing personnel matters in a public forum." "Oh, but, Director," Whitehouse said, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher correcting a particularly slow student, "these aren't allegations anymore. These are facts, and the pattern is quite clear when you see it all laid out." He turned to the second page of the document, this one containing what appeared to be a spreadsheet with names, positions, and coded annotations. The organization was meticulous, professional, terrifying in its implications. According to this document, of the 60 individuals identified on what your staff apparently calls the priority attention list, interesting euphemism, by the way, 20 have already faced adverse actions. That's a 33% hit rate, Director, in less than 7 months. That's not normal turnover. That's not routine personnel management. That's systematic retaliation. The mathematics were brutal. In any normal year, the FBI might see a handful of senior personnel changes, usually retirements or voluntary transfers, but 20 targeted actions against people who had apparently been pre-identified as problems. The statistical probability of that being coincidental was effectively zero. Patel's media training began to break down. "Senator, I resent the implication that the FBI under my leadership engages in any form of retaliation. We have robust protections for whistleblowers, and anyone who believes they've been treated unfairly has multiple avenues for redress." Robust protections? Whitehouse's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger creeping through his prosecutorial calm. "Director, let me tell you about Agent Jennifer Morrison, 22 years at the Bureau, spotless record, commendations for her work on domestic terrorism cases. According to this document, she was flagged because she expressed concerns about politicization of FBI operations. Last week, she was informed that her security clearance was under review. For the first time in 2 decades, the gallery stirred. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was a person, a career, a life disrupted by what appeared to be political revenge. Morrison's name wasn't publicly known, but in the insular world of federal law enforcement, stories travel fast. If Whitehouse had her name and details, he had sources inside the Bureau who were terrified enough to risk their own careers. "And then there's Assistant Director Thomas Richardson," Whitehouse continued, his momentum building. 30-year veteran, led the investigation into Russian election interference. According to your list, he was categorized as having divided loyalties because he defended the Mueller investigation. He announced his early retirement last month. Curious timing, don't you think? Each revelation was methodically destroying Patel's credibility. The director's carefully prepared talking points were useless against this level of detailed preparation. He was fighting a battle with weapons he hadn't known existed until moments ago. "Senator," Patel said, his voice now showing clear stress, "I categorically deny the existence of any enemies list. If individuals have chosen to retire or transfer, those are personal decisions that I respect. The FBI is a large organization with natural turnover." Natural turnover. Whitehouse repeated the phrase, as if tasting something bitter. "Director, let me share one more interesting detail from this document. There's a financial component that I think the American people will find particularly disturbing." He turned to a new section of the folder, one marked with red tabs and what appeared to be budget documents. The pages were covered in highlighter marks and handwritten notes. Someone had spent considerable time analyzing these numbers. According to internal FBI budget documents that have been shared with my office, the Bureau has spent approximately $2.7 million on what are euphemistically called personnel transition costs since your arrival. This includes severance packages, early retirement buyouts, and legal fees related to employment disputes. That's roughly 5 times the normal annual expenditure for such costs. The $2.7 million figure landed like a physical blow. It wasn't just about careers anymore. It was about taxpayer money being used to fund what appeared to be a political purge. The American people were paying for their own law enforcement agency to be weaponized against its own employees. Patel's composure finally cracked. Senator, these budget figures are taken out of context. There are always costs associated with personnel management in an organization of our size. Out of context? Whitehouse's voice dripped with disdain. Director, the context is that you took office promising to drain the swamp at the FBI. And now we have documentary evidence of a systematic campaign to remove career professionals who don't share your political views. The context is that American taxpayers are funding political retaliation inside their own government. The chamber was dead silent, except for the soft clicking of laptop keys, as reporters frantically typed. On social media, Nenemy's list was already trending. C-SPAN's live stream was being shared thousands of times per minute. What had started as a routine oversight hearing was becoming a defining moment in FBI history. Let me be very specific about what this document alleges, Whitehouse said, his voice taking on the cadence of a closing argument. It suggests that within weeks of your confirmation, your staff compiled a list of FBI employees who were considered potentially disloyal based on their past assignments, their political views, or their previous statements about FBI independence. It suggests that this list was used to target these individuals for investigation, transfer, or forced retirement, and it suggests that this was all done with your knowledge and approval. Patel was trapped. Denial would fly in the face of documented evidence. Admission would be career suicide, and potentially criminal. He chose a middle path that satisfied no one. Senator, if any of my staff engaged in improper conduct, I would want to know about it immediately, but I cannot comment on the authenticity of documents that may have been obtained improperly or taken out of context. It was a lawyer's answer. Technically correct, but morally bankrupt. Whitehouse pounced on it immediately. So you're not denying that such a list exists? You're just questioning how we obtained evidence of it. I'm saying that personnel decisions at the FBI are made based on legitimate factors, not political considerations. That's not what I asked. Whitehouse's prosecutorial instincts were fully engaged now. I asked if you're denying the existence of a list. It's a yes or no question, Director. The pause that followed seemed to last forever. In the gallery, veteran FBI agents watched their director squirm under questioning. On Twitter, former Justice Department officials were already calling for his resignation. In Republican offices on Capitol Hill, staff members were frantically Googling FBI director removal process. I am not personally aware of any enemies list, Patel finally said, choosing his words with the precision of someone who knows he's being recorded for history.
Not personally aware.
Whitehouse seized on the qualification immediately. That's interesting phrasing. Are you saying such a list might exist, but you just don't know about it? Because that would raise serious questions about your management of the Bureau. Patel realized his mistake immediately. He had left himself only bad options. Either he was running a rogue agency, or he was lying under oath about his role in political retaliation. His face flushed slightly, the first visible sign that his composure was completely shattered. What I'm saying, Senator, is that I would never authorize any form of retaliation against FBI employees based on their political views or past assignments. If such conduct has occurred, it would be contrary to my directions and FBI policy. If such conduct has occurred, Whitehouse's voice rose to a near shout. Director, I'm holding documentation that suggests it has occurred, systematically and extensively. 20 people's careers have been derailed. Millions of dollars have been spent, and you're still talking about if. The senator stood up, his tall frame imposing even across the committee table. The gesture was purely theatrical, but devastatingly effective. Every camera in the room focused on him as he prepared to deliver what everyone sensed would be the killing blow. Director Patel, he said, his voice now carrying the full weight of senatorial authority, you swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. That includes protecting the civil service from political retaliation. You swore to preserve the independence of the FBI from partisan influence. Based on the evidence I've seen today, you have violated both of those oaths. The accusation hung in the air like a verdict. In the gallery, former FBI officials shook their heads in disgust. On social media, calls for Patel's resignation were multiplying exponentially. Even some Republican senators were beginning to distance themselves from a director they had once supported. Patel made one final attempt to salvage his position. "Senator, I have devoted my entire career to law enforcement and justice. I would never knowingly allow the FBI to be used as a tool of political retaliation. If there are specific allegations of misconduct, I encourage anyone with information to come forward through proper channels so we can investigate thoroughly." It was too little, too late. Whitehouse had exposed not just alleged misconduct, but a systematic pattern of retaliation that went to the heart of FBI independence. The damage was irreversible. "Director," Whitehouse said, returning to his seat, but maintaining his aggressive posture, "the proper channel is sitting right here. This committee has oversight responsibility for the FBI. We don't need to wait for internal investigations that might be compromised by the very people we're investigating. We need answers now." He picked up the folder again, his message clear. There was more where this came from. Patel's ordeal was far from over. "I'm going to make this very simple," Whitehouse continued. "Will you commit today to providing this committee with all documents related to personnel actions taken since your confirmation? Will you commit to allowing affected employees to testify without retaliation? Will you commit to an independent investigation of these allegations?" 3 questions, each one a trap. Agreeing would likely expose additional misconduct and end his career. Refusing would confirm that he had something to hide and end his career just as quickly. Patel's lawyers had prepared him for tough questions, but not for this level of documented evidence and prosecutorial skill. He was fighting a battle he couldn't win with weapons he didn't have. "Senator, I'm always willing to work with this committee within appropriate legal and procedural boundaries," he said, the non-answer of a man buying time he didn't have. "That's not a commitment," Whitehouse shot back. "That's a politician's dodge. The American people deserve better from their FBI director." The hearing continued for another hour, but the damage was already done. Patel's credibility was shattered, his leadership was questioned, and his future was in serious doubt. By evening, calls for his resignation were coming from both parties. By the end of the week, the Justice Department Inspector General had announced a formal investigation. The enemies list scandal would ultimately lead to Patel's resignation, criminal referrals for several FBI officials, and a complete overhaul of personnel procedures at the Bureau. But it started with 47 seconds, 3 words, and one senator who refused to let political retaliation hide behind bureaucratic language. When the history of this moment is written, it will be remembered not just as the downfall of one FBI director, but as a reminder that oversight matters. Documentation beats denial, and sometimes the most powerful weapon in Washington is simply the truth, properly presented by someone who knows how to use it. The enemies list existed. The retaliation was real. The cover-up failed. And democracy, for at least one afternoon, worked exactly as it was supposed to. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a badge or a subpoena. It's truth, archived and revealed at the right second. What happens when a leader, who built power on secrecy, is undone by evidence? If patriotism can't survive transparency, was it ever real? If this story shattered illusions, don't just watch, like, share, and subscribe to our channel, where silence gets broken and lies get time-stamped. Hit the bell. The next truth might be about your president. What would you do if you had evidence this explosive? Drop a comment below. This dramatized story is inspired by real events and public figures. All dialogue and incidents are fictionalized for commentary and educational purposes. This is not intended to defame, but to explore themes of power, truth, and accountability.